Hey everyone, Margarita here. In this video, I'm going to talk about the list of people and agencies who have helped my mother along the way carry out the false narrative and the crimes about me, all regarding the stolen trust fund and painting the picture to look like I look like a mental disorder drug addict. And who has all been involved. I'm going to give specific names, specific agencies. And I do want to mention that because I only have shortly over 200 videos up currently, and I have quite a ways to go. Like I said, this has been going on my entire life. So even though I've released a lot of information, there's still quite a bit more to go. I have not talked about all situations yet. I have not talked about all people and all agencies yet. So there's a lot more to go that I'm not even there yet. So one of the reasons I'm not going to talk about some of the people or even mention some people's names or some of the agencies' names is because I don't have enough information in my hands to release certain people and agencies. Although some of it does exist, I'm still working on gathering a lot of this. This has taken me a very long time to do. And part of the other reason is because arrests still need to be made, and some of this information needs to be given to investigators prior to it being released to the general public. Another one of the reasons is because there's just so much, there's so many people, this is so long-term nonstop that it's likely I may have forgotten some people or some situations. Not that I forgot, but as I'm writing all this down, there's still certain situations because I've had that I'm going to forget because I've walked around for a couple days trying to write this out to make sure I don't forget anybody, but it's still going to happen. Just because of how long this has gone on, how many situations have happened. It's all back to back to back, overlapping with each other nonstop. So there's some I'm going to miss accidentally, some is intentional. And I will come out with the further stories down the line. I'm doing this in a certain order. I'll get there down the line on how I've come up with the order in which I'm releasing this information. But okay, so some of this information also, there isn't a way for me to know all of the names for numerous reasons, because certain agencies have, or companies have, many people who've been involved in whatever situation was going on. Some of them I don't know their names. Some of them lied about their names. Some of them I just don't have. But I will state the agencies and the people whose names I don't have. I will state the agencies and give an idea of how many people need to be looked into at that agency, or I can kind of give a description of who needs to be looked into. So some of that I will talk about. And then it's important to note that my mother has lied to every family member that she has and that my dad has since I was a small child, since the trust was left, which is hundreds of people because my mother's grandmother had 13 children. So there's hundreds of cousins. There's hundreds just on her side. And then same with my dad's side. There's a lot of cousins. And so my mother controls the false narrative with all of these people. She has every step of the way. And because I cut all ties at 18 and I had no contact with her or any of these people, that's how it was able to be gotten away with. And everybody just believed her every step of the way. They just believed it, the way she delivered the information, the way she said it. Everyone just believed her. Nobody ever stopped to think that maybe they should talk to me or try to reach out to me. Not one person ever tried to help or reach out to me. So I don't, all of these hundreds of cousins have been the flying monkeys in the background all along, all these family members. And as far as I know today, except for like the 1% that I've talked to in the past, since I've been an adult, I do talk to about 1% of them who know the real me, but the rest of them do not because there's just so many people. Not everybody talks to each other. But beyond that, all of them still believe the false narrative to this day. This is the most extreme slander, defamation of character, libel case that's ever existed. There's never been another situation even comparable to mine ever in history in the United States, probably the world. Because this is just not normal. It's never happened as far as I can figure out with what I've looked into. So also I want to mention, so two of the biggest flying monkeys in this are my mother's sister, Yolanda Norkowitz, and her niece, Rita Norkowitz Murakishi. So the two of them, that is how she reinforced the false narrative and kept it going and kept the harassment and abuse going to a more extreme degree, because she controlled the narrative with them two all along, and then made it appear to all the other family members along the way. So those two would reinforce the false narrative for her as well. And it appeared to everybody else that those two had information about me as well, but they actually didn't. They had no contact with me regularly from the time I moved out at 18 to the current day, and I cut them off completely about 7 years ago. There was only sporadic contact, and even then, they were still living on the false narrative about me, which is why they always talked to me and treated me the way they did. Even though I would try to correct them at times, they still would go around reality and operate as if I'm the person she had portrayed me to be all along. So those two played a very large role in helping everybody believe the false narrative, and everyone just believed they had proper information because of how close they are to my mother, and they really assumed that they were that close to me or they knew something about me. Now, a big part of that is in 2013, my mother got the two of them to become my daughter's godparents and got my daughter to be baptized and make her first communion. And those documents that were given during that, I believe she took to the attorney's office to help gain access to the trust fund as well. And they would have also backed it up that I'm not in the picture, or my mother's the one raising them, and they're agreeing and they're backing her up and saying, yes, 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 and we're the godparents. See, here's the documentation. They're involved in all of that. And I believe that's part of the reason that was forced upon my daughter at that time. And really that was still not reality. I still had custody of all my kids. My kids all live with me. I raised my kids. She never had custody. The information they were being given and feeding other people were delusions, and they backed it up. And so with those church documents, that helped portray the false narrative even further. And with the delusions coming out of their mouths as well, it looked believable. And I do believe it's a possibility that the two of them have helped fraudulently gain access to the trust fund with my mother at some point. And they may have written notarized statements and or showed up in person as well. I'm not too sure on that, but definitely the church documents exist, and that is part of the reason that was forced upon my daughter. So they would have to be investigated and detained and questioned because they're full of nothing but delusions. And even if you were trying to present them with reality, they would still be trying to tell you what a mental disorder drug addict I am and how my mother raised my kids. So a lot of these people are going to be stuck in the mentality of the entire false narrative, even when you're presenting the truth to them. And like I said, I completely cut them out about 7 years ago. So, and those are also the two that were screaming delusions at me the day my dad fell and met when I was at the hospital waiting for him to come out of surgery. They showed up there and created a whole problem with screaming her delusions at me. Obviously, they were told something even more excessive about me in the recent history of, those coming days or weeks or months or years even. And they believed it. And I'm not sure what that is, but those are the two I also made the police report on in Royal Oak, Michigan, shortly after that happened. Okay, so, and like I stated, these hundreds of family members, the majority, unless they've seen my videos and they've seen enough of them and they've caught on to the reality, they all believe this entire false narrative, or unless it's the 1% who do actually know me. So they're all reinforcing the false narrative. They have every step of the way. That way, if anybody else at any point along the way, any agencies, any people, anybody, she'll have these hundreds of people be able to verify this false narrative, and it looks real. So that's also how this was able to be carried out for so long. And let's see here. Okay, another key piece here is that along the way, there's been a lot of people who are either paid or they took bribes or they were made promises of payment in the future to follow me around, gather information on me, befriend me, or get jobs where I've worked or visit as customers where I've worked from 2002 to the current day. That has never stopped. So once I turned 18, once I bought my first home and I moved out and I cut all ties, the very first person had showed up at the job I had at that time. I'd been working at that job 2 years. This person is a couple years younger than me. I do have a little bit of proof. It's enough to consider him a person of interest at the very least with the evidence I do have. And that was where the very first one showed up. And these type of people showed up throughout my life sporadically throughout the course of all this time. It's never stopped. And if I were to leave and go to work right now, most likely it's a very high possibility that I would run into one of these people. Because at this point, there has been so many that have flooded the entertainment industry in every establishment that is within driving distance of my home in Flat Rock, Michigan. So anywhere in an hour of any which direction. Um, Within the past 5 years or so, she managed to get a lot of people just getting one or two people involved who is connected to her group. And those people were able to flood the entire industry with many individuals. And it went on for a very long period of time. And then when I started moving to different establishments, they dispersed and they were all at every different establishment I went to going forward. So the entire industry is flooded with these people who are just awaiting to see me and cause further problems because they were paid to make sure that basically like I get fired even though I'm self-employed. They're paid to do things to make sure that I'm not able to continue working there, that I'm not able to continue my income. And that's what's at the root of it. My mother is at the root of that and her criminal group. So I will talk more about that in a minute because I don't have the majority of their names, but I'm going to give a little bit of information regarding it. And once this goes to investigators, it would be able to bust open the whole thing because these people are also involved in other crimes. I believe it's human trafficking. I'm not sure if they're all of age. Some of them don't look like it, but they could be. So they're doing numerous scams, and they also have a separate group. These people are out of the Ohio area, or they were originally, and some of them have came up to Michigan. But then they also target people with assets, just like my mother's group does, and um, they have like a human trafficking thing, either that or it could be a legal escort service, one or the other. And then they also target people with assets, and they play like pregnancy tricks, and they trick people with either real or fake pregnancies, and probably numerous people with each pregnancy, each person. And that's what I've seen with my own two eyes. Because again, these people followed me around for two and a half years in my face, and this is what I seen them doing with my own two eyes, and followed enough to get enough information at that time. So those are the other crimes that group is particularly involved in. Um, and then I also want to mention that the delusional phone call placing that my mother's done since the time the trust was left, even though it started with my teachers, and then it turned into large agencies and police departments and many other places. It's any situation she can insert herself in. That's where she'll place the delusional phone calls and gain control over the false narrative. Literally every situation. So she has made this a full-time job. Again, my dad has always paid all the bills. She has no other children. She never raised any grandchildren. She doesn't have any pets. She literally dedicated her entire life to destroying my life, carrying out the false narrative about me, making sure she could gain access to this trust fund and not me, and literally made this a full-time job. So every situation she has inserted herself in along the way. And she was also calling numerous places that I've worked. She'd call in and gain she would like build a rapport with certain managers or anybody who would listen, who had some type of power at certain places I've worked along the way. And I believe she did this with Heather Malice at the Taylor Applebee's around 2011 or 12. She did that there so I would get fired. But she didn't understand that I'm also already self-employed and I already make really good money. It didn't affect the amount of money I was making. So at that time, when I was getting ready to cash out on a property in Florida, it had been going on for some time, for some months. She was regularly calling her, and then it did end up leading to me, like getting fired. But it was staged. So that is another incident I do know happened, but it's happened at numerous places. It's not just that one time. And then she also, at the church that I was speaking about where my daughter got baptized and made her communion, that church was St. Rock's Catholic Church in Flat Rock, Michigan. That is where the 2013 escapade began. And I have the video up on that already that I posted last year in 2025. So it is labeled that. She gained the entire control of over the false narrative about me at that church with every person who goes there, and the people who run it. And those people, I'm not sure what they were told, but they sent me a letter at one point to my mother's address with a different last name on it, with my daughter's last name on it. So she must have told them I was married. I'm not sure what she said to them, but it was not the truth. And all of those people believed that she had custody of and raised my daughter and many other things. So I'm not sure of what was said, but you're talking hundreds more people at the entire congregation there who all believe this. And then she does attend at least one or two other churches. All of those people believe it as well. So all the people that used to attend All Saints Church in Southwest Detroit off Spring Wells and Fort Street, all of those people believe the false narrative. I do have some of their names. So there's many people that could be interviewed along the way that could verify this entire false narrative. Now, let's see. Okay. Now, secondary, because I'm going to go back and I'm going to start with all the names. Actually, no, I'll start with the names first. Okay, and then I'll talk about this in the end. Because there's other people who have committed crimes, people in companies or agencies. Well, it's companies, really. Those happened due to my mother's crimes first, and the situation traveling into the fallout of her initial crimes and escapades and harassment, and it would travel into these other situations because that's the only reason those other situations occurred. So there's about one, two, three. There's four situations, and like at least six people. So I will talk about that at the end after I mention all of the people and agencies. Okay, I know that was a long intro, but that I kind of had to get out first. Now, again, at the top of this pyramid, at the top of this whole scheme, is my mother, Julia Rita Camarda. She does go by Julie. Some people call her Julie, but I don't want this to get confused with my dad's sister because her maiden name is Julie Camarda also, although her last name has been changed for some decades and she's been married for some decades, or widowed, I should say. So she's had a different last name for a very long time. So this pertains to my mother's married name, Julia Rita Camarda, and her maiden name is Julia Rita Cisneros. So she's at the top of this pyramid. Okay, and I'm going to kind of do this in order, but there's really no way to do this in order because a lot of these people are intertwined with each other at some point. It may not even be right away. They're intertwined down the line. So it's not actually going to be in order. I'm just going to read it like how I wrote it. And at one point, I was thinking of writing this on the wall and using yarn and thumbtacks like the way detectives do. I was going to do that and do the video that way. But I don't want to waste any more time than what I've already spent doing all this because these videos take a lot of time and energy and effort. And again, I'm chronically sick, permanently injured. I have a lot of things going on, but the only way to get matters in order is to have arrests be made, have the money turned over to me, so things can flow properly because this has gone on for far too long. So I did not do that. I'm just going to read it how I wrote it. Okay, so at Bates Elementary, when I was in fifth grade, so it was 1994, 1995, the first two people who played a significant role in the extreme amounts of harassment and abuse were two of the fifth grade teachers. Lori Whitaker was her name. I don't know if that's still her name today or if she's still teaching. And Brenda Thompson was her name at the time. And 10 years ago, she was married to Mr. Theobald. So her name was then Brenda Theobald. And then that was again verified because my daughter had her as a teacher that 10 years ago, but she didn't realize that was my daughter because we have different last names until the very last week of school. And the look on her face that day told me even more. And I even said way back then when this was going on, there's a couple people who can verify this, but I said that someday in the future, I would be exposing her for what she did to me at that time. And this is long before internet or social media came out. So here I am today, all these decades later, because what she did was that extreme. Now, I talked about it in the previous video or a couple videos ago. So those two were the first two. And then when I got to 10th grade at Woodhaven High School, it was Mr. Caudill was the 10th grade math teacher. It was 1999 to 2000, but he is no longer living. And the next person So this is the same time frame when my mother was able to. This is where she started using the Brownstown police, and she was trying to use the police and the mental health system to have me deemed mentally incompetent. She was able to get me locked up in the Wyandotte, Michigan mental, the hospital over there at Henry Ford. The 10th floor was the mental ward. And so she was able to temporarily get me locked up there for a week or two. And Diane Stachel, she is the one who helped her at that time. I know this because I have some of these people's cards. They did show up here about 5-6 years, 5-6 years ago. So I do have their business cards because my mother would collect them along the way so she could place delusional phone calls and keep the false narrative going. That is also part of the proof. At that same time frame, she got Apex Behavioral Health involved in Inkster, Michigan, Middle Belt Road, and that's where she got Sandra L. Chambers involved. This was 1999 to 2001. She is the one who was that got me. So the first lady, Diane Stachel, she's the one who got me put on tranquilizers, which I should have never been given. And then after my dad came and got me out of the mental hospital, I then uh, went back to this therapy place where Sandra L. Chambers was part of the reason I was given the Celexa that I was later charged with a felony with, because it should have never been given to me. These people are giving me these pills based on the delusions my mother is telling them, not anything to do with reality. All they were seeing was me being gaslit, heavily gaslit repeatedly, no break from any of it, ongoing my entire life, extreme mental, emotional, and physical abuse the entire time, which nobody ever saw. She did it behind closed doors. She would slip behind a door if we were out in public, and when I'd come out, I'd be screaming and crying, and people would always think I was the problem. So that is how she was able to pull all of this off, and how all of these people gave me these drugs I should have never been given. That is also why I chose not to take it, because I knew I wasn't the problem. Now I can also back this up because I have a picture of the intake paperwork, and you can clearly see that's not somebody with a mental disorder. So also at that same place, Apex Behavioral Health in Inkster, in September of 2025, my mother then got a psychiatrist by the name Carla Lee, and she has been seeing my dad regularly for the past several months. And what it is she's countering uh, all of the work and all the documentation that Charmaine has been documenting for the past 6 years. She's repeating delusions to my dad over and over and over, which she's done my entire life, but even more so since I've been banned from seeing my dad, all fraudulently. And she's repeating all these delusions to him. And then he got to a point where he probably couldn't take what was going on. And now she's got him spitting those delusions out to Carla Lee over at Apex Behavioral Health. Now she's documenting everything my dad is saying, unaware that those are my mother's delusions. None of what he's saying to her is actually reality. It's her repeating delusions to him. That is going on in the current day, as far as I know, because it was on the last documents for probate court. That is still going on. That needs to be addressed immediately. Brownstown Police Department has been involved in these crimes from the year 2000 to the current day. Now, because there's so many officers who've been involved over the course of all this time, every officer that's worked there in the last 26 years needs to be investigated and interviewed for this matter, because there's no way for me to know exactly who. And I know it's more than just the police officers. There are other people who work there as well, because there's things that I noticed when I was gathering records, and the manner in which the records were altered and the timeline in which it took them to give them to me. They went way past the allowed timeline. There's numerous problems with it. It's more than the officers. It's everybody who's ever worked there in the past 26 years. Their department is extremely corrupt. And I also believe their department is responsible for the retired firefighter who lived on West Road in the 1990s, who was murdered in his home right before Christmas. I think it was Christmas Eve or right before Christmas. I do believe that they are responsible for his stabbing as well. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, I will give some further information on that. That is an unsolved murder. Yeah, go ahead, show up at my house and do the same thing. It's not going to work. I promise you, it's not going to work. So yes, I just don't care that I'm exposing all these people with all this power. Um, yeah, It's just not going to work. That's all. Going forward. So literally every officer who's ever worked there from that time frame. Then we have Officer Susan Meter, who was the Woodhaven High School liaison officer, but she was also a Brownstown police officer from 1999 to 2001 or longer. She was involved in the crimes against me, taking my mother's delusional phone calls, repeating, um, taking the calls about how I supposedly was planning to blow up the school, and a friend of mine was supposedly planning this or shooting up the school or whatever it was. She was responsible for believing that phone call. And then the following year, she is also the one who, um, you know, took me to jail for having the prescription on me that should have never been given to me. And then also, I'm not sure if she's the one who put the warrant out for my arrest when I wasn't supposed to be charged. I don't know who my mother talked to because my dad and I were already gone. But this can also be verified because I'm in contact with the two people who were involved in this situation. I'm still in contact with them today. We can reach out to them at any moment. So no, I was never supposed to be charged. Nobody was supposed to be charged. And I don't know if it was Susan Meter or if it was a different officer or more than one officer at that time. But then there was a warrant put out for my arrest. And I was charged with a felony, and that should have never happened because the pill should have never been given to me. So that would need to be looked into. I don't know who's all responsible. And then in 2004, we have Detective Dan Grant is the one who set me up to sign a paper stating I was selling drugs out of my car and then charged me with a felony. And then we have Detective Mike Ramsey, badge number 14. I would say as long as he's worked there, he could have been involved. I'm not sure exactly when he became involved, but I do believe long term. And he is also the one who brought in Tony Baloney. So Michael A. Carmen, the one who was sent into my life to pretend to date me, to either get me arrested or charged or incarcerated long term or deemed mentally incompetent or deceased. That was the point of the fake relationship. He's the one who brought him in. I have many sets of proof. I have not talked about everything in all these videos. Even the people I have talked about, I have not talked about everything that I have. So that's how he was brought into the situation in 2023. And then Detective Mike Ramsey also has a brother, Brian Ramsey. I don't have enough information to know if he's involved exactly, but it is a possibility. But like I said, every person there needs to be investigated. So then we have Officer Kristen Tolax, badge number 30. She wrote the false report on me that my mother gave in 2024. Talking about how I stole my dad's money, which I didn't steal. And I just filmed the video where it proves that I didn't steal any money. And I have all the proof in my hands, but nobody's ever properly investigated because they didn't plan to. They're promising me to be locked up on these false fraud charges so they can all gain access to the trust. So she's involved in taking that report and writing all of that. Then we have Officers Max, badge number 156. And then I also have badge number 151 and 170 from 2021 to 2024, or it could be up to the current day. Those are the different officers who were involved from 2021 to the current day in the different situations that have happened. How my mother staged a false trespassing incident out in front of her house, how my daughter was not returned to me and she remained truant for a year and a half, and how I'm making these reports and nobody's taking my reports, and they're just missing from their system altogether. There's numerous reports from Brownstown that are just completely omitted. They were never even entered into the system, a lot of them. And then the attempted murder on my life that my mother was caught in the act of, that's also missing from the system. So there's more officers involved than what I have because a lot of these reports are missing or I don't have their information. But those are the ones I do have. And then we have Brownstown Prosecutor Dean Robinette, 2024 or longer, could possibly be involved because I've left 2 long messages for him. One of them I have recorded. I've never heard back from him, and that is extremely suspicious. So at the very least, he is a person of interest. Even if he's not involved directly, he's at least covering for his peoples, because of him not returning the phone calls. And a lot of these crimes have taken place in Brownstown in the past 26 years using the Brownstown Police Department. And my mother's crimes directly have been in Brownstown in the past 26 years. So at the very least, person of interest, could be more than that. And like I said, there's many other people who work there. I don't have their names or their positions, not officers, but there's other people who are involved. Then we have the Flat Rock, Michigan Police Department. All officers that have worked there from 2017 to 2023 need to be investigated, detained, and questioned, because there's been many people who have showed up at my house during that time frame, and it's all based on my mother's delusional phone calls, my mother repeating delusions to everybody in my household and causing extreme chaos while I was in a fight for my life, being left for dead in the medical system. Every single officer who's ever come to my address needs to be investigated. I don't have the stack of reports because it is almost $500. So maybe down the line I will get some of those. Either way, there is numerous police officers out of Flat Rock who are involved in the crimes, and most likely Sergeant Matthew Welchinsky has taken bribery money in all of this, and promises of future payment once I'm locked up, because he is also the one responsible for falsely arresting me. And then down the line in 2023, threatening to falsely arrest me again. And then he told me he's waiting to do so, matter of fact. And then he said after the $100,000 in damage was done to my home, he said he's waiting for her to come back here. And if she still has my address on her ID, that he's still going to arrest me and let her stay in the home and do more damage. But he is directly involved, and he did reverse over $100,000 in out-of-pocket treatments, as it took me all those years and all that money to seal my brain tissue shut. His actions, the false arrest, dragging me from my home when I was homebound, based on my mother's delusional phone calls, stating that this is not my home, this is my ex's home, and he pays all the bills, and that's not reality. Nobody investigated, and I told them they could go look. There's no man stuff in my house whatsoever. And I was still arrested, and it permanently re-injured my brain tissue, caused extensive additional loss of quality of life, because I had already lost 5 years, and then it caused an additional 5 years of loss of more quality of life due to those actions that day. I did make a report with the Department of Justice, but I wasn't able to do so until 2024, and I don't think they investigate anything longer than 6 months. And because I live in so much chaos and I'm so injured and there's so many crimes ongoing, there's no way for me to keep up on any of this, or do lawsuits along the way or anything, because I live in extreme chaos, and it's been that way for decades, and especially since my injury. So that was done, but I don't think anything like came of it. And there's many other officers. I just don't have their names because I also don't have the reports. But at the very least, Sergeant Matthew Wilchinsky was also taking my mother's delusional phone calls along the way from the time I bought this house in 2017, and just believed whatever she was telling him all along. So that is why he was so pumped up and arrogant about causing the damage to me physically, and trying to remove me from my home. He even stated to my family members that I wouldn't be back in my own home, even though I'm the one who pays all the bills here. So yeah, he needs to be removed immediately and arrested and charged for his crimes and the physical damage to my brain, and the financial damage that's happened, because now there's no way for me to get the brain tissue repaired without upgrading my chamber system, which would cost about $60,000 to $65,000, which he should be responsible for replacing. Now, with the city of Flat Rock, everybody who works at the city of Flat Rock needs to be investigated and questioned, because during the 2021 Ford gas spill, my mother inserted herself in that, and whoever was running that and whoever she talked to, all those people helped participate in those crimes and getting my hotel cut off, and believing that I had a mental disorder and a drug problem. My son and I were never injured, and the intent was to kill, because I was not going to survive in the home with the high levels of gas, with the brain tissue open in the manner in which it was, in which we had been under treatment for many years prior to this. It was not just made up in that moment. It was ongoing. And they didn't want to believe that somebody was that extremely injured, treating an inpatient injury on an outpatient basis, because they've never heard of anybody being that injured and not being in a hospital. But the reason I was never treated in the hospital, my son was never treated in the hospital, is because my mother's crimes and her involvement in working in the medical system and preventing our treatment directly. So, or she used others to do it, but still, she physically was there, pulled them aside, and got them to not treat us and enter false information. That was the reason that it was being treated that way. So during the 2021 Ford gas spill, every employee who ever spoke with my mother, anybody who knows who I am, because I don't know most of these people, they need to be investigated and questioned, including the mayor, Christine, who ran the Ford spill at the top of Ford. Don't remember her last name. Charmaine might have it, because she also called Charmaine. My mother gave her Charmaine's number. And then Christine told on herself for believing these delusions about me, told Charmaine that herself. She's the one who was in charge of cutting my hotel off. It literally took 2 years for all those particles to clear for me to be in the home and travel to and from work safely, because I was working in Toledo at the time. That's where my money was being made. So she is responsible for that. That is criminal in nature, because I did not almost survive many times. My son almost did not survive many times. Now we have Eric Holtz, who is the Department of Public Services and Water and Sewer in Flat Rock. Now he's the one who's in charge of making sure that the sewers stayed flushed. And he did not believe that I was also that injured all along the way. And I had to place numerous calls to them during the original spill. And then they spilled 2 more times once I was back in my home in 2023, in the beginning of 2024. Or no, was it 2020? No, it was 2024 and the beginning of 2025. So Ford had spilled 2 more times, just not nearly as much as that last time. And I had to speak with him at one point. There's already a video up of our conversation under that playlist with pertaining to the Ford spill. And he did not believe that that was my situation either. And then he couldn't figure out how I had this information that Ford even spilled again. And it's because my brain tissue is open. I don't need somebody to tell me the particles load up with every breath. So I did talk to him. And then he did figure out that I'm not lying, because I couldn't have possibly ever known that information. And later that day and the next day, fire trucks flooded the entire area, and there was a power line on fire. The levels were very high. They were flushing, and I have video, and I caught them flushing after I made that call to him. So everything is time and date stamped, which proves that what I say is really going on, because there's no way I could have ever had that information. Nobody had that information. So he was involved in the first spill as well, and flushing those sewers. But really, it's the entire city of Flat Rock, because that went on for an extended period of time, and that's what forced me from my home, and cost me a lot of money out of pocket in those out of pocket treatments. It was $600 a week just to barely keep us alive while we were still in the home on the treatments, and the treatments were being reversed every week, just because we're taking in so many particles and the brain tissue is so open. And they were supposed to reimburse me for all of those treatments during that time. I was already under treatment, and then I had to make sure all those particles I was taking in and my son was taking in were being removed from our system, so we wouldn't have survived. And we were supposed to be reimbursed, and there's numerous people who deleted my emails, claimed to have never gotten them, and we never received a penny, and it was tens of thousands of dollars from the time of the spill to the time I got us out of here to safety in my other home. So I was supposed to be paid back for that, and they acted like they never received it, and I just have a mental disorder. Now we have Romulus Police Department. Corporal Farhat is no longer with them. I just discovered this earlier today. He is actually in the Dearborn Heights Police Department now, and he is now the Director of Operations and specializing in organized crime. Go figure. He wrote that I have a mental disorder after I made a report in advance of my mother's crimes and what's all been going on. And my dad keep getting rushed back to the hospital. My mom poisoning his food, all the crimes she's participated in the past, what's going to happen in the future. And instead of actually investigating or checking with anyone, he reaches out directly to my mother, where she states I have a mental disorder and a substance abuse issue, and he restates that in the police report. So what he saw me looking like and the way I was shaking and how messed up I was when I was in there is because long term I had been injured at that point, severely injured, almost 6 years, under treatment the entire time. Half of that time was daily, and I had just lost the ability to maintain treatment, and I had just recently had a 4th brain injury, and a couple weeks after that I had a 5th brain injury. So at that point, I had not been rested. I had no rest, no recovery, no proper treatment initially, and struggled and suffered, and basically just, was like spinning in circles, barely keeping my footing and barely holding on and barely keeping us alive, barely keeping things going. That entire 6 years from the beginning of my injury. And then my dad fell, and then I'm running all over the place, living in extreme chaos from my mom's escapades during my dad's injury. And from all that running around, running back and forth, everything that had gone on, all the rushes back to the hospital in the middle of the night, and all the games she was playing, all the crimes she was committing, plus everything regarding my own injury. By the time that I made this report, I was almost completely wiped out. I was barely holding on. And at this point, I was shaking quite a bit because I have all the brain injuries and I was no longer treating in the manner in which I had my entire injury. Now, mind you, the first like 4 years of my injury, I spent shaking a lot, almost continuously. And it was due to how overloaded my brain and my system were with carbon monoxide mixed with the brain injuries. So when he wrote that I appeared to have a mental disorder and delusions, because not only did my mother tell him that, but when he's looking at me and after everything I have going on, even though I stated it all in that report, he believed that what he saw was a mental disorder when in fact it was not. And this could have been verified with my care team, which I've already signed off long ago that they have the right to speak with anybody they need to regarding setting any matters like in truth regarding the situation. If anybody is to call regarding my situation, they are allowed to speak about it because the truth is the truth, not the delusions everybody's been spreading about me. So he continued to write a false police report about me having a mental disorder, just none of it's real, just because he doesn't want to believe somebody's mother is out here doing what I say she's doing, and this is organized crime. And apparently that's one of the specialties on what he's now doing in Dearborn Heights. I don't know how you can uh, be the director of all that and be involved in getting organized crime under control and you're participating in it. Also, I also discovered last week Officer Christopher Reyna from 2023 to current, so that's also Corporal Farhat 2023 to current, wrote the false reports on me stating that I twisted my words and restated something totally different than what I said on the phone. Even though I spoke with a female officer, I'm just not sure if he was listening in when she was talking to me or if she just relayed the information to him and he wrote it. I'm not sure. But he also wrote a false report on me stating that I admitted to stealing my dad's money, twisted all the words I said, and I have the proof that I did not. So I'll be showing that in the next video. Um, and it could be numerous officers in Romulus. I'm not sure. And there is one other report from there that I don't have. At the same time, Special Tree Spinal Care Facility is in Romulus, Michigan. All of my mother's crimes against my dad, all the poisoning batches of food, all the delusions, all the false reports, all the false reports to Special Tree, the false reports to the police department, that's all in Romulus because my dad's care facility is in Romulus. So my mother has controlled and manipulated every staff member at Special Tree in Romulus from 2023 to current. They're also responsible for my dad getting the trach tube. I warned them in advance that he should not be ever left in her care or released with her in advance of him ever checking in there. From the very beginning of his injury, they did not listen to me. They let him leave with her. And a couple days later, when he was brought back, he was near death. They had to call 911. He was in septic shock. I don't know if he actually had to be brought back and he was unresponsive, but he was still unconscious when I found him several days later in the ICU at Beaumont Wayne. Now, so part of the rushes back to the hospital that were ongoing, I don't know if they're still ongoing, but they were ongoing for definitely the first 15 months of my dad's injury. What my mother was doing was rendering my dad with no phone when he could still use the phone and he could still talk. She is the one who caused his condition to significantly decline to the degree injured and sick he is today. He was not like this after his injury. She's 100% caused all of it with all of the poisoning batches of food at Special Tree. And what she was doing is she was rendering him helpless with no phone, and she would not be there with him when he would get rushed back to the hospital every time. So my kids and I were not even finding out that's what was going on until usually it would be like 24 to 48 hours before we'd figure out that he was actually in the ICU again or in the emergency room in a hospital. And she was nowhere in sight. She wasn't there at the hospital. She wasn't with him any of these times. She would take his phone and she wouldn't tell any of us either. So there was a big delay in us ever finding out about any of this. And she's causing a lot of these crimes have happened in Romulus at Special Tree. So an investigation needs to happen immediately. Especially into these false reports, and that all these false reports and these delusions are the reason I'm banned from my dad. Like I said, the entire staff, all the staff, especially the people in the office. Now, those people in the office, they've never really talked to me. They've only seen her. She comes during the day. I was coming in the evening. There is nobody there in the office in the evening. They got all their information about me from her. They all believe the entire false narrative about me. And again, my life speaks for itself. My lifestyle speaks for itself, and you will see in the next video. So all of those people should actually be shown the next video. There's extreme defamation of character, libel, and slander, and many false reports about me and my dad's medical record there at Specialty. These are all delusions, and I'm being banned from my dad for all my mother's crimes, basically. So there's proof of all of this. Somebody needs to investigate and line it up. I have all the proof. I can tell you where to find what I don't have, and I have all of the proof of all of these crimes. So this needs to be investigated by a federal agency, but at the very least, Romulus needs to step in and start looking into the false reports of my mother's crime in Romulus alone and at Specialty. Also at that same time frame, U of M Hospital in Ann Arbor and their police department, because the hospital has their own police department, they deleted the police report that I made on my mother about the rushes back to the hospital regarding my dad there. And so no reports exist. So their police department, I don't know if it ever entered the system and they just got rid of it, or they just never entered it, but those reports are omitted completely. And also at that hospital, the head of the social work department in the emergency room, she's a really old lady. She refused to take my report seriously. And then after I spoke with her, she had me banned from the entire facility. I'm not allowed to go into U of M Ann Arbor at all. And it was her that did it because she didn't want to believe my mother's committing the crimes that I say she's been committing for all these decades. And she believed whatever false narrative my mother fed her. And those people all got together along with my mother, and they used their security department to ban me permanently from that hospital. And so the security department needs to be looked into. The old lady, she's about 75, 80 years old, works as the head of social work in the department in the ER. And then the entire social work department at U of M Ann Arbor. All of those departments need to be looked into. Those people directly participated. Even after I stated to all of them what was going on, they refused to believe me. They refused to investigate. And the old lady specifically said that she's going to allow my mother to continue to poison my dad and allow him to keep getting rushed back to the hospital. And they're just going to continue to treat him for his symptoms every time. So that was her specific words to me. I do not remember her name, but if I seen her, I could point her out. But yeah, she's like probably the oldest person working there, or at least at that time. I don't know if she's still working, but she was at that time. Now, Beaumont Hospital, Royal Oak. Okay, Beaumont Hospital, Royal Oak in 2023. Abigail Berlin is the one who wrote the false information about me at the beginning of my dad's fall, before my mother ever even returned home from California after his fall. Now, I also spoke with her boss, Emily, who's at the top of patient and family experience in Royal Oak, and she also refused to take my report or listen to what was going on. She believed the delusions my mother fed her because my mother was a 45-year Beaumont employee. So they refused to help me. And I spoke with another guy who was like ahead of him at the top of the hospital, and he also did not help. I'm sure there's no written report because these people just kept writing delusions about me and my dad's record, all based on whatever my delusional mother's telling them. So those people are all involved in the false information in my dad's medical records and writing all that stuff about me that is not real. And then Beaumont Hospital, Dearborn. So this is pertaining to my injury. Once I became injured in 2018 and 2019, Beaumont Hospital, Dearborn, and Trenton, and all the way to current with Trenton. Dr. Girotley wrote false information in my medical file about me. And it's information that I cannot see when I request my records. It's pegging me as having some type of severe mental disorder, but it was my mother who pulled her aside in the middle of the visit. Her office is connected to the main hospital in Dearborn, and my mother physically inserted herself in the middle of the visit, pulled the lady from my room, told her I'm always known to lie. I've always had this mental disorder, this drug problem. And she goes, oh, okay. Kicks me out, no treatment, living in an extreme medical emergency, already had 2 brain injuries, could not explain myself, in a continuous state of shaking, 50, 60 severe symptoms at once, brain swelling, brain sagging, suffocation, the whole 9 yards. I was stuck that way. And that lady was supposed to be a workplace hazard specialist doctor. She knows nothing about workplace hazards. So later down the line, it was told to me by a different person that worked in the Beaumont system that how I need to go back and see Dr. Girotley. Why would I go see this woman who knows nothing about me? Seen her the one time and she wrote a bunch of false stuff about me based on my mother's illusions. That's not my doctor. Why would I ever see her? So somebody at a later date kept repeating how I needed to go see this woman. I would never be seeing her. But this is the woman who wrote false information in my Beaumont file, but it came from my mother and I watched it happen. So also Beaumont Trenton, Susan Horling. This happened in 2018. Also, I was at the end of 2018. She kicked me out of the hospital, no treatment, believed what was in there from Dr. Giratli, wrote on it, acted like I wasn't injured, like I wasn't in dire need of oxygen, and had been stuck that way for almost a year with no help, no oxygen to the brain. She was trying to have me like apprehended and detained against my will because she believed the false information that was in my medical file that came from Dr. Giratli, that came from my mother. So she reinforced that and put more false information into my record. Now there is many other Beaumont Hospital employees who participated in this. I don't have their names. There's a lot to go through when it comes to those files, but pretty much anybody who's ever touched my medical file within Beaumont from 2018 to the current day has put false information, has participated in leaving me severely injured with no treatment, causing further injury. Every person who's literally touched my medical file needs to be questioned, and they are all involved, every single one of them, because I've never gotten treatment from that day to where we are today. There's been many visits, and I was also brought in dead in 2023 in June. Kicked out, no help, no treatment, bleeding from the head, unresponsive for 15 minutes. After the oxygen was cut off from my brain first, and then I cracked my head open. Every person, every visit within that hospital, including every visit for my now almost 10-year-old son. So the both of us, from 2018 to current, the entire Beaumont system. Anything prior to that, I had no medical history prior to my injuries, so there was no medical history in any system. So it's literally anybody who's ever touched my file within Beaumont, but it's all at the hands of my mother. And all of the false information in my dad's medical records, they have my anything pertaining to me, it's all false. My mother's at the root of that. And again, she worked in medical records. That's how she knows how to do all this. And then her wiping my dad's medication, his pain medication, during every transfer after she'd poison him and he'd be near death and he'd get rushed back to the hospital. That's where she would physically insert herself, pull somebody aside, tell him he doesn't take the pain meds. So when he gets sent back to specialty, he'd be sent back with no pain meds, and he'd be left in severe pain as well. So she's done that to all three of us, my youngest son, myself, and my dad, all along the way repeatedly. So every hospital my dad's ever been to from 2023 to current has all these false records, and it is my mother doing all of this. Vibra Hospital in Taylor, Michigan. I was banned from there by Makia Moore in Celesta, Washington in 2023 and 2024. And that is also due to my mother telling them delusions about me, and entering false information in my dad's medical file. I'm not sure what exactly was said, but they also refused to bring the police in and let me speak about what's going on. Now, also, Terry Knorr from North Star Care Management is my dad's nurse care manager. This lady is about my mother's age, and she has also been told a lot of false information about me that she has believed 100% of the time, and has taken action on that. And she was also, I believe, her and my uncle Vince, my dad's brother, are the two that helped get my mother's false power of attorney signed, which I can prove is false, but nobody's investigated, and I have the proof in hand. And the two of them are responsible for that. Now, Monroe County CPS, there's been many people because I lived out there for almost 5 years. From 2002 to 2007, there's been many people, and my mother is at the root of all of those circumstances happening in all of those investigations. And that is the reason I was forced from my home in 2007 and forced into my second home that I bought in 2007. And Courtney Villarreal is at the top of that list. She is the one who pulled me aside in the hallway after my mother got her to take the case to court, as I stated in the last video, and promised she'd be back for my kids. So my mother and her are responsible for why I was forced away from my very first home, and I should have never been. My bills were paid ahead 3 months, and she has this woman operating on her behalf. And then we have Wayne County CPS. There are many people because there was many calls in between the time of my injury and 2021. So 2018 to 2021, there was a lot of people. And there was also another situation in 2011 with Wayne County CPS. All of those people are involved in the harassment. My mother placing delusional phone calls, giving them information, false information about me throughout the course of all of it, claiming to have raised and always had custody of my kids all throughout all of it. And then during my injury, them showing up here repeatedly, her telling them I have this ongoing mental disorder, can't take care of my kids, It's really an extreme medical emergency. I'm being left for dead with no help in the medical system, no treatment, but she's causing that. So that was all going on repeatedly, many, many times. I can't even tell you how many times. I don't have those files, but I do have like about 100 pages printed from 2002 to 2020. Now, also, we have Lucas County, Ohio CPS in February of 2023, right after my dad fell. And I tried to report my mother for her crimes in the very beginning. She then called Lucas County CPS and tried to launch a fraudulent investigation on me there. Thing is, I kept my address private. My main home here in Michigan, my address has never changed the whole time I've lived here because I was only temporarily gone, and I knew that from the beginning. And I was only renting out 2/3 of my home. So that was never my legal address. I just had a second home, and she didn't know that. So she sent this lady on a wild goose chase, and all they had was a P.O. box, and they couldn't find me, so it didn't go very far. But she did talk to me on the phone, and I know the false allegations, and those came from my mother. So whoever took that call, she believed the false information, and she played a role. Now we have attorney Jessica M. Richelo. Bruce and Associates in 2013 typed up an entire false report on me and submitted it to the Monroe County friend of the court to fraudulently get my daughter's dad custody of her when she was about 9 at that time. Was she 8 or 9? I think she was 8 at that time. Yeah. So my mother is at the root of that. The check that paid her came from my parents' bank account. It is my mother who fed her all that false information for her to type all of that up, snatch my daughter from me and get her in her possession, just to cause a ruckus. That is the 2013 escapade. That was part of that, which that video is already up. Now we have Finazzo Orthodontics in Southgate, Michigan. The lady at the front desk from 2018 to 2022 was taking my mother's delusional phone calls repeatedly throughout that time period and claiming to have always had custody of and raised my kids. And that lady believed it. She also tried to call 911 on me at that time. When I tried to get the reports, they said there wasn't any. So they must have canceled the call right after I booked it out of there real fast. But that was the paper I showed in the last video, how my mother signed off on my oldest son's braces. She only wanted the braces on his teeth to show control and to probably show the attorney's office that she had custody of and raised him. And here's the proof right here. See, I paid for his braces. So that woman didn't believe anything I was saying when I was telling her that's what my mother was doing, because she saw me in an extreme medical emergency with no treatment, with my brain in a continuous state of swelling. That was when I got the braces on my daughter because I didn't think I was going to live. The brain swelling episode had just happened. I was in a very extreme state, and I almost could not even get back to the office just the very first day to get the braces on her teeth because I was so close to death and so injured without help from the medical system. This was truly an inpatient injury. At no time should I have ever been in the outside world or at home or standing or working or driving. And I was forced to, or we still weren't going to live. My son and I would have never lived. So that woman saw all of that, and she believed what she saw was a mental disorder or a drug problem, whatever my mother was telling her. But she participated and allowed my mother to sign off on the braces and really believed my mother had custody, and none of that was real. So that's actually a crime because my mother never had custody of any of my kids. She's not a guardian of any type, and she believed it and just kept allowing my mother to sign for things that she had no business signing for. Those are crimes. Now we have Great Lakes Psychology Group. I don't know his name, but the guy who called CPS in the beginning of 2021, I hired him specifically for my daughter. And because my mother was able to gain control, repeat delusions to her, and then one of her visits happened when she was on the phone at my parents' house. And now, mind you, at this time, I had been stating to my dad repeatedly, I do not want my older 2 kids at your house. You are not allowed to take them to your house. And it kept happening, and my mother was causing the situations to happen where my daughter kept needing to be picked up from here, and my dad would do it. And it was my mother causing all of it. And when he'd go back home, then my mother's repeating delusions to all of them, and they were both screaming delusions in my house. So there is many reports of this with the Flat Rock Police Department because this had to be reported because it got so far out of control. But my mother was doing it, and it was an extreme manner, and it was still during the time my brain was in a continuous state of swelling and sagging, and I'm suffocating. My brain's burning, bleeding. All these things are going on at one time. And this was going on the whole time. So that guy called CPS fraudulently when I explained to him when he was brought in what the situation was. And then he turned around and called CPS anyway. So he was fired immediately. I'm the one who hired him, and then he got fired immediately. So after that, she only saw Charmaine, but even then, it was still there's still problems because she should have never stopped seeing Charmaine at that time frame. She was still a minor. I'm the one in control of her care, and everybody was allowed to overparent me, override me in a criminal manner, which has led to all the problems I have in the current day with both of my older kids. So that also trickles down to some of the problems I have with my youngest. All of this, what's all gone on, because none of what we've been through is normal, and this has gone on his whole life because we stayed so injured the first 5 years of his life. Um, so we do not live normal lives whatsoever. Now we have the Monroe County probation officer, Stephanie Pride. I already made a video on that. She is the one who tampered with my drug test after my mother started calling her, and uh, she thought that they all thought I would be doing long-term jail time or prison time with that tampered with drug test because nobody realized I went and got my own and I was never on drugs. But she did tamper with it, and I'm able to prove it because I took one at my doctor's just prior to that and my own private test at a third-party facility after. So I talk about that in the other video that's labeled Stephanie Pride. Now, there was also a Monroe County sheriff or a Monroe County officer. He worked for the sheriff's department by the name of Bill Obazi. He's the one who fraudulently pulled me over and I got a DUI. The whole thing was a setup. There's a lot more to that situation I've not talked about yet. There's more people involved. I've not talked about that either. But like I said, there's just so much going on. But he wrote a false report on me, and I can prove it. It was never a legit stop in the first place. No charges should have ever been filed. And the whole DUI was a setup, either way you look at it, prior to that. So this is also what Tony Baloney was trying to do, trying to get me to drink and drink and drink and then like drive. Although I don't really drink that much. In the night of that party, I literally only had a little bit and I had just left. And the circumstances leading up to that forced me to leave really fast, but it was all a setup. So every step of the way was a setup regarding that, but it was Bill Bazzi, regardless of anything else. Bill Bazzi pulls people over regularly, writes false reports, and gives people DUIs. He's got a lot of awards for it in Monroe, and now he works in Dearborn Heights, and he's doing the same thing there. So ironically, Corporal Farhat now works for Dearborn Heights, and they know each other, and they work together. So how ironic. But below Bazia, when I looked him up today, he has worked at the Dearborn Heights Police Department for the past 2 years now. And he is, I think it said 325 DUI arrests in the last 2 years. That's almost one every night he works. Now, the reason for this is because he doesn't actually do legit stops. He says people have a tail light out or a license plate light out, or they were swerving all over the road. And he's writing this because people know they can't really disprove it or they don't think about it in the moment. And he just pulls people over based on the time of night. And I do have some of the proof in my possession that he does this. So if you look at the Dearborn Heights reports, those 325 reports since he's been there, I guarantee you're going to find the same thing. So he's pulling people over fraudulently, getting all these accolades and these awards for what he's doing, but it's all setups and they're not actually legit stops on the majority of them. So this guy's a fraud all around. Whether or not he's connected to the criminal group, I don't know, but on his own, he's a fraud. So what he's doing is illegal. He needs to be investigated himself. Now, in 2013, when my kids were kidnapped and my mother had the attorney in Monroe write the false reports on me to get my daughter in her possession, at the same time, it was my oldest son's dad and his girlfriend. So Christopher Smith and Laura Romans, they were basically trying to get child support out of me because they saw how hard I worked and how much money I was making, and they were mooching off of numerous people. And that was what their agenda was. Separately, my mother had her own agenda. And then separately, my daughter's dad had his own agenda because he had been stuck in the child support system his entire life, never had a paycheck, nothing to really live off of. And she promised him he wouldn't ever have to pay child support again if he just signed the paper, which he did without reading it. So the three of them participated in signing false documents in 2013 with Wayne County Friend of the Court and Monroe County Friend of the Court. And it was so my mother could get, so they could all get access to the trust fund, which my mother was going to do. And so that's why my kids were kidnapped, and it caused a loss of 2 businesses and tens of thousands of dollars at that time for me because of the escapade that they went on. It went on for about 5 months. And at the same time, so that's my youngest son's dad as well. because that's how we ended up together, and that's how we ended up being able to cut my parents out of the situation and stop the harassment and all that. That happened in 2013. But down the line in 2021 to 2023, once my daughter was truant, and Brownstown Police and Flat Rock Police and the Monroe County Front of the Court all played a role, and my mother inserted herself in all of it, and they all participated in the crimes, because now there's videos up on all of it. He also submitted false documentation and lied in court as well, and that's why my daughter stayed truant as well. So he played a role in this. And now, looking at the bigger picture of what's all gone on the last several years, it's very possible that she could be promising him money once I'm deceased, or once I'm incarcerated, or like numerous things. He could have played a role in numerous ways, but at the very least, his signature is on numerous documents, and it's all fraudulent, and that can all be proven because he's the one with the substance abuse issue. But at the same time, he also has a $250,000 life insurance policy on me, and his behavior with everything that has gone on is not normal. This is not how you would be behaving, even in the recent, like, last 12 months. The way he's been behaving, the things he's been saying, what's been going on, seems like he's involved. So he is someone who at least needs to be a person of interest and questioned, because the signature on all these papers is provable. So it's very possible, because he also played a role in making sure my son and I did not get treatment when it became an extreme medical emergency. If we're together technically and you're under my roof and I'm the one paying all the bills and I'm near death and so is your son, the normal response wouldn't be to run out the door and keep partying for years on end, and we're fighting to stay alive for years on end. But that's what was going on. This is all provable. That is also why Charmaine removed him from my home in 2020. But there is numerous sets of fraudulent court documents with his signature. Now, the way he's been acting recently, especially with the things going on, what's being said to him, you can tell by his response. It's not a normal response either. So there's something with that situation. Now there's more people. I don't know their names, a lot of them. Okay, so there's the random guy who was in his early 20s at the Uncle Sam Jam in 2013 when my kids were kidnapped, who was sent to find me and my business and take our picture. I should have showed the picture. I do have it. But he did do that, and it showed up in the court file. I knew he was paid and hired by my mother, and I couldn't prove it. And I thought at the time, this is when I really caught on. I thought, no, that's like really far-fetched, and then not long after that, a week later, that's where I was served all those false papers to snatch my daughter, where my daughter's dad was on his signatures on there, and he showed up at the place to snatch her. They needed him present to snatch her that day, because there is no grandparents' rights. Brownstown Police also participated in that. They all did it together. But that's where that picture showed up in that court file. So that was where I was really alerted. No, this is not far-fetched. This is what's going on. It's been going on. I knew she operated that way. And now we also have the fat guy that was in the messy tan Crown Victoria that sat across the street from my house in 2018, and then followed me to the gas station in Ohio, and then followed me to work. I don't know his name. I don't know who he is, or if he's actually a real private investigator, or if he's just some idiot who took a bribe or got paid, or I don't know who he is. But if I seen him, I could tell you. And he even looked like a private investigator, how they usually have junk and paperwork all on their dashboard. He had that as well. Now, also in 2020, it was either December 2022 or January 2023, there was a middle-aged black guy who appeared at my work in Ohio, and he told on himself for what he was there to do and who he was, because he called me by my real name, and I've worked there for many years. Nobody even knows my real name. Nobody knows my government name. And then he said how I know that I have a mental disorder, that I know that that's a mental disorder. Okay, so nobody would be saying that to me, because I've never had a mental disorder. Nobody there the whole time I've worked there, because they don't know anything about my private life and all these problems and all this chaos, because I check that shit at the door and don't talk about it. So nobody ever had any information like that. And then by calling me by my real name, also the fact that he didn't have strip club etiquette, and he was doing a lot of things that he shouldn't have been doing. And you can tell he was there to seek me out from the second he walked through the door. He did many things, but he told on himself. I have no idea who he is. But he was there that day, and I knew at that point that I needed to get a PPO on my mother and the people that she's been hiring. But then my dad fell right after that. So with the chaos with my daughter still being truant and all the front of the court matters going on for a year and a half that was going on at that time, with everything going on, I never had the ability to do it. And then my dad fell. So everything became more chaotic going forward. I was never able to address it. Now we also have Amy Mathias. Amy Mathias is the one who was paid to become me. Now there is video footage in Ohio at a police department. I'm not even going to say which one. But there is numerous officers who can verify that that's what was going on, and they have the proof in their possession, which I am going to try to get. Now she did follow me to my work and try to take over every aspect of my life as well. She initially showed up dating my neighbor next door, who was also targeted separately by their criminal group. Now, the criminal group I was talking about down in Ohio, she is one of the ringleaders of, and the guy, I believe it's the guy she's with. And if it's not, if she's truly not with this guy, which I think she is, it's a family member of hers because the baby looks just like the guy, and that's the guy who was also paid to insert himself in my life and date me. At that time, I think it was the end of 2021 in the beginning of 2022. And now I've seen him going forward numerous times at my work, but I only went out with him twice just to gather the information. Because at this point, numerous people had already been like, I couldn't even prove that the two knew each other at that time. I eventually did catch them together. And when they saw me walk out and they were talking, they split like they never even were talking, like they've never even known each other. They weren't talking, but I caught them. So I knew they knew each other. They're the two running the criminal ring down in Ohio, and I believe it is a human trafficking ring, or like a legal prostitution ring, possibly like an escort service, maybe. But they also target people for assets, and they scam people with either real pregnancies or fake pregnancies, and they basically brought in about 20 people, maybe more, into the entire situation to harass me, to get rid of me. And then they kind of all spread out to the different bars. But there was numerous people at a time doing this for about 2.5 years. And then when I came up to Michigan, they all spread out there as well. And also at that time, I brought in a friend of mine from high school who can verify that that is definitely the girl that was next door, and then had followed me to work, and her group of people. In all that. So there is somebody credible that can verify all of this. Actually, there's several people. But then at the same time, she was slowly turning herself into me, and in every way possible. And what it is I believe she was, I don't know how these groups, like how she was brought into the picture, or how her and this guy were brought into all this. Like they must know somebody from my mother's group. But they were brought in with the intention of taking over my life, or her taking over my life, and presenting as me at the attorney's office to gain access to the trust. So that is what was going on from like 2021 to 2024, although she did have a baby at the end of 2024, somewhere in 2024. And I believe they were presenting like her as me having another baby. The situations are connected. I have enough proof to prove that this needs to be looked into. It is interstate, and I have more than enough proof of that. So, but the guy that I'm pretty sure that's the actual baby daddy, not the guy that she shows in her real life Facebook photos, because you can't see the guy's face. I think that's just a staged relationship, and they might even, I don't know, like, if she's actually married to anybody, or if it's like a staged relationship, and then separately she's, that baby is the guy that was paid to insert himself into my life and try to date me. And then he made a lot of assumptions as well, told on himself right away. I was just gathering the information. But for some reason, he assumed he was going to come to my house. And I said, I don't bring people to my house. So I don't know where he got I was going to like bring anybody to my house, but I don't. And that guy, so that's the two that I caught talking. Them two are running the prostitution ring for sure. And that baby, it looks exactly like that guy. I don't have his real name because he didn't give me his real name. I doubt he gave me his real name. And I also don't remember because I live in so much chaos, and there were so many of these people all inserting themselves into my life at this time. But his role was to basically try to date me. He just thought I was naive. I was just going to let him into my life, and he was just going to take over everything I'm doing and everything I have. And he was probably going to try to deem me mentally incompetent. Probably had the same agenda as Tony Baloney. But this guy gave himself away right away, and that's why I only went out with him twice. And he was just like really far out there, so far gone from like any of reality. And I could tell he assumed so many things about me. I never continued to talk to him after that, although he did show up at my work numerous times after that. And we did talk there in my work numerous times, where he further told on himself numerous times. So I don't actually know the guy's name, but I believe like he must be the one somebody from my mother's group knows. But the two of them are doing this together, and they've done it to many customers. They've done it to many people. And then their group of their like 20 plus individuals were doing it all together. All of them were doing it. Some of these people, they didn't stay more than a day or a week or anything. They couldn't do what I do. They can't do that line of work. So some of them just came and went, and I never seen them again. But there is at least 10 that stuck around long term, maybe longer than that, maybe more than 10. It could be closer, like 15, who stuck around long term and followed me to the different establishments. And then there was another girl. So I don't have this girl's real name, but her stripper name at the time was Miami. I don't know what she, excuse me, I don't know what she goes by now. But that girl broke my nose, punched me in the face, and I got a fifth brain injury in November of 2023 because my head hit the locker. And I was walking around with brain bleeding for numerous months. And it was due to her. So the two of them are connected. This Miami girl is part of the group. This was set up so I would be fired from the establishment, which they did succeed at. So it was all a setup, and they made it look like something that it wasn't, but it was brewing to this over a 2.5 year period. This is not something that they just came in and did. They had all been following me around. They set this up intentionally. And this was Amy's last day at work. She was already pregnant, and she wasn't coming back to work until after the baby was born. And it was set up for that to happen that night. And Miami was going to be the one to do it, because the pregnant girl wasn't going to punch me, nor would she actually be able to fight me. But the other girl did it when I turned around. I didn't even know she was in there. And they staged all of it to happen. So it looked like I was the problem. And I couldn't even seek medical help, although I didn't place a 911 call. I called the like non-emergency line from my bed once I got home, because my brain was bleeding so bad and my nose was bleeding so bad. But I couldn't even seek medical attention because I knew they weren't going to let me leave. And that was when the damage to my house happened. And I had the team of people coming the next morning. The dumpster was getting delivered. The team of people was ready to break down the door, and I couldn't get police help, and she was refusing to let us in. And the night before is when Sergeant Matthew Wilczynski in Flat Rock refused to help me, threatened to falsely arrest me again, and I couldn't get help or into the home. And I had to use all those contractors and all those people to get into the home. So I knew I had to be here at 9 o'clock that morning, and I was an hour away with my brain bleeding, and I knew I had to get here. That was it. I knew I had to get here. I barely made it here. I stayed messed up. I stayed with my brain bleeding for several months until I had enough treatment to reverse that additional injury. However, I was still treating the fourth brain injury at that point as well. So it aggravated all the previous brain injuries. One more kept happening, another kept happening. It just kept traveling on and adding to the bucket of brain injuries. So there is other people that I've not talked about. That entire situation, there's a lot more to it. I'll go further into detail in its own playlist, because there's so much more to that situation, because it went on for 2.5 years there, in Ohio, back and forth. Some of these girls did follow me back and forth between Michigan and Ohio repeatedly. They did take turns following me home from work sometimes, and then they did sit across the street from my house a few times, until the one night, it was Valentine's Day of 2022, actually. The last time I caught them sitting across the street from my house, they never did it again. But I realized what was going on, and I wanted to see for sure if it was those girls, if it was some of those girls. It was some of the girls in the group. It was 2 carloads, and it was a Monday night. I put the pedal to the floor, put the car in reverse, put the pedal to the floor, and I flew all the way backwards to where they were sitting. And I pulled right up on them, and the one girl was standing outside of the car, so I verified for sure that was them. I just didn't see the whole car full or who all of them were, but I verified at least one of them was from the group. And they never sat across the street after that, but I basically squealed the tire so loud that it woke up the whole neighborhood. In the house they were sitting in front of the guy's a retired cop. So that's what I did. I never seen them sitting out front after, but these girls are all connected, and they are connected to the guy, and I don't know his name. But if you follow Amy Mathias around and you look up her address and you follow her around long enough, I'm sure you'll find the guy, who I'm sure is still running this prostitution ring or this escort service or whatever. If you follow them long enough, I'm pretty sure that's the real baby daddy, and her actual Facebook with her real name is not the baby daddy. So that's just what I've picked up on. There's a lot more to that entire situation. Again, I would have to talk to investigators because there's a lot to it. But I do believe she was presented at the attorney's office to try to gain access to the trust as me. Presented her, my mother in the group probably presented her as me. And I have more than enough proof to prove that that's what was going on at that time, or at least it was attempted. I don't believe it actually worked, but I do believe it was attempted, and it's just a separate criminal group who operates separately than the one my mother is involved with. So that's what I have for now. The last thing I want to mention, how I said there's like additional people with the like secondary to the other crimes that my mother's at the root of. We have Jennifer Fulop. She is the one who was renting my house out. Now, all that damage was, a lot of it was water damage because her kids left the water running. It was criminal negligence. I was not able to make a police report because of Sergeant Matthew Wilchinski's crimes and all the delusions he believes about me. And they all just believed I couldn't afford my house. And I'm just this problem. And I'm so dumb. I just let this girl rent out my house. That's not at all what was going on. It was an extreme emergency. I was living with my brain bleeding the entire time. And at the same time, she threw away the insurance checks, so I also could not report that. That is what led to my bankruptcy. I can't report any of this because of the Flat Rock Police's involvement in the crimes. Then we have Hutzel Women's Hospital. So that's where I gave birth, suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning in 2016, and they covered up what happened, and they did not give us oxygen, even though they knew we needed oxygen. That was the beginning stages of everything because it could have been prevented. And that was separate from my mother. She's not affiliated with that hospital. She didn't even know where I was. And then there's an organ trafficking situation going on at that hospital, which was attempted on myself and my son. And then we have Little Daddy's is the place that caused my injury, that had the carbon monoxide issue. But again, I should have never been in there. I was rebuilding from my mother's 2013 escapade, and I should have never been in the building in the first place. So they covered all that up and acted like they never had a carbon monoxide issue. It was never zero. They caused all of it, and I never had a medical history prior to stepping foot into there ever. And Keith DeSurchik is at the top of that, and the attorney who helped participate in this is Roger Martin. And when it did finally go to court last year, they acted as if I wasn't still in need of future ongoing treatment, like I'm not still living in the initial medical emergency with my brain tissue open, living a very modified life, and then acting like I did not pay what I paid out of pocket, and that immediate treatment was needed. At that time, immediate treatment was still needed. In that moment, I still had not had my replacement concentrator replaced yet. And I do believe my mother had called them in the background as well when she figured out something happened to me, to tell them that I'm making the whole thing up. I believe that did happen. And those two were operating on that in court. Also, the workers' comp court system is fraudulent. I will get more into that way down the line. The entire thing is fraudulent, and those people also participated in the crime. So anybody that had my case regarding that is responsible. It's about 5 people total. So Keith DeSurchik, Roger Martin, and then 3 of the referees or whatever they were, magistrates, I think. Whatever they were, they're all involved, and there's one other attorney. They're all involved. So I will talk about in its own playlist down the line, but they covered up my injury, and I was left with taking $4,900, or at that time I would have lost my house. So because of all the crimes piggybacking off each other, everything just tumbling over into this disaster, I had no choice. But I do believe they were told that my injuries were not real. And those were also crimes because they did not even try to remove me. They kept trying to cover it up. And had I not removed myself, if I came back in there one time, I would have been dead. I was barely alive. And because it went on for so long and I needed every last penny because it had gone on for so long at that point, I continued to go in there even though I shouldn't have been standing or working. And I wasn't receiving treatment in the medical system due to my mother's crimes. So it's all tied together. And technically that's obstruction of justice because that should have never happened. And I also should have never been in there. Separately, the Oxford Center in Troy, Michigan, and Brighton, Michigan, that is where we did treat. That is how we got to live. That's where I spent almost 200 grand out of pocket. There is separate crimes that happened only to me. versus everybody else that went there. And it's because I had a covered condition that insurance was willing to pay for. So the crimes with Tamala Peterson being responsible for the 5-year-old boy's death, and those people, she is also responsible for extorting me for tens of thousands of dollars in order to stay alive and refusing to bill my insurance. And the lady who's already in prison, Casey Diskin, she is also responsible for that. So I will talk more about that down the line. There is already some videos up, but they are involved in the crimes over there separately. So there are some separate crimes going on with Jennifer Fulop, Women's Hustle Hospital, Little Daddies, the Workers' Comp Court, and the Oxford Center. So those people are responsible for separate crimes, but the only reason all those situations were happening was due to my mother's crimes originally. So none of those people would be involved if my mother's crimes didn't occur in the first place. So that is it for this video. I will come back and talk about more of the people and situations that I have not talked about yet. Like there's a lot, like literally there's so much more. But I cannot talk about the rest right now. I will talk about more in the future. Stay tuned.